Welcome to the Dynasty Evaluation Show. We are here today to talk about some IDP. Well, it's an IDP league we started, but we're not sure if we're going Dynasty, redraft, what our settings were going to be. So we decided to go redraft and just pick from there. We'll tell you all about our experience in this draft, how many rounds we did, all that kind of stuff, and why you should be in an IDP league also. So thanks for joining us today. JT, the co-host with the Mo-host, is back and better than ever today. To kind of go, he's the IDP extraordinaire. So for me to join these leagues, it took him a long time to get the hook and the fish on this one to finally get me in these IDP leagues. So we did it. I'm here, but we still had some questions about what league is about. I have a buddy of mine who made a patent for some medical device that was his father died because of a bad medical procedure, and he made a device that he had no idea what he was doing in a medical world, but he thought outside the box, and he made this like a syringe thing for IVs and stuff like that. That's anybody could do it, blah, blah. So just the comparison to that is I've never done IDP before, so I had a lot of questions that these guys maybe had horse blinders on about, like, what about this and what about that and what about that? And there were so many questions. What we decided to do was start a redraft league this year and then take all of our scoring questions and all of our lineup questions and all the stuff that these guys kind of have some experience with, and then take us guys who have never done it before with the questions we had, put it in our crazy scoring format. If you know me and JT, especially myself, my scoring is crazy. So we wanted to see how our scoring came out looking compared to linebackers, compared to running backs, compared to DBs, compared to wide receivers, vice versa, here and there. So we get an idea. Because we don't want to be locked, rat-holed into a dynasty league where, man, there's 3 or 4 guys who just had this, this all-Madden team, and the rest of us are sitting back when it's going to take 25 years for us to catch up. So we want to give everybody a taste of the players, the scoring system, the roster size, all this stuff like that. And then when we all got a pretty good grasp on it, we all know players, what's going on, we jump into Dynasty year 2. So, JT, have you ever done that before? Was that a good idea? What do you think about that?
I'd actually never done that before, but I actually thought it was a fairly good idea because you and a couple other guys have never been in IDP league. It can be a little scary, especially if you're going, oh man, I'm in this league and I've never done it before. What if I blow this draft and then I'm stuck with this crazy, terrible team forever? So I actually thought it was not a bad idea. Just got to get guys' feet wet. With the idea that this league would redraft and turn into a full dynasty starting the second year. It also gives us a chance to kind of look over the scoring, because we kind of did a combo of like a high IDP scoring league with kind of your high bonuses and things that you do for your home leagues. So I thought it was a kind of a nice mixture of like, okay, let's try it out, see how the scoring works. If the first year we're like, oh man, this position's way under scoring, or this position's scoring way too much, then we can make adjustments. And then everyone knows what the adjustments are and can redraft that way for the dynasty. So they can say, okay, I kind of ignored these defensive positions or whatever. I need to draft a little earlier this next time because, man, I waited and my guys scored terrible and it screwed me. Or, oh, hey, man, we were pretty right on. Guys were kind of getting defensive players when they should, and it kind of worked out, and we could kind of make little adjustments from there. So, it's a little more time-consuming to do it this way, seeing as you have to have 2 long drafts. But I thought it was worth a shot, especially for all the guys that wanted to be in the league going forward for multiple years, to make sure we were doing it right, so make sure people were happy. And I think it took the worry off some of the guys' minds going, hey, if I totally jack this draft up, it's not going to screw me forever because I can re-look at it and make my adjustments next year for when we actually do full dynasty.
So JT made up the show sheet last night. We had a family party going on and stuff. And I noticed that question too is, you are the commissioner of the league. I'm the co-commissioner. I got invited to this league by somebody. I have no idea what's going on. I had no idea how I took over the commissionership of this league.
Are you the commissioner? I
No,
thought
I'm
you were
not
the
the
commission. Are you not? I thought you.
I'm not the commission this
You
league
took this. That's so funny. As for some reason, I was thinking you were the commission of this league.
because
Who is the
everybody.
commission of this league?
I had a bunch of ideas. I kept asking the commissioner that.
Oh, that's what happened. Everybody kept thinking you were the commission because you kept putting out like a ton of things, and then people were like, because people kept tagging you and me, and I was like, so I was like, I guess I'm the co-commission this league with John. I don't know what's going on because people kept tagging me and stuff, and I'm like, why are they tagging me like I'm the commissioner? So then I got the idea that you were the commission. Somehow I got selected for co-commission duties or something because I was wondering why everyone was tagging me in the group chat all the time.
Right.
So, oh, that's good to know. All right, I don't have that on my list of things I have to do then.
Yeah, especially in an IDP league when things are, not that a commissioner's job is not to go in and tamper with lineups or revoke trades or things like that. If anything was to go wrong, it's a lot. Anything on sleeper site I could pretty much take care of with adding or adjusting rosters or somebody forgot something or some kind of settings or whatever. So that's all a commissioner really needs to do anyway. So I don't mind it, but I kind of I feel like I'm a little bit in over my head joining an IDP league to be commissioner right away and be that kind of stuff. But the redraft thing was definitely my idea. So if these are the things that help leagues by with your commissioner experience, then I don't mind taking over. The question kind of threw me off guard. Like,
well, see, that's because I was obviously totally unaware. Well, also what threw me off was we're in divisions, and so I thought for sure you're the commission because I was like, no one else hardly does divisions this way, and the divisions are set up just like you have in your home leagues. So I was like.
Shit.
So I was like, oh man, this must be John's doing. I'm never in leagues with divisions, and they're all broken to 4 divisions with 3 teams, and I'm like, you do for your home leagues. So I figured that had to be you. Maybe there is another division person out there that likes that.
Maybe there's one more of me in the whole universe that likes divisions. That's okay. I'll take it.
That is honestly partly why I got thrown off as well. So I was like, oh, okay. So now that we're breaking it down, John, I'm happy to have you in IDP League. I hope you love it. I think you will. So I think it'll be exciting. As soon as you get that first win from a defensive stop or a sack, you're going to be hooked. That's the best part.
Mm-hmm. Peter, thanks for joining us today. Peter Nova, big IDP.
Yeah. So we got 12 teams, 4 divisions. Like I said, broke down. We're going to kind of like go through this scoring, talk a little bit about the draft, talk a little bit about our teams, what we liked and didn't like about them, if there's anything else we liked about other people's teams. But I figure we kind of break this thing down for anyone who's thinking about possibly starting an IDP league or a new league. We can kind of talk them through what we did here.
Yeah, so let's talk about the settings first of all. Like this was our biggest thing because we had so many questions about the settings. Who does this and how many linebackers and this and that. So when you go to settings, JT, what from the leagues that you've experienced before compared to the settings we have in this league, how different are these first of all from the get? I mean, are they pretty much on par, or the stuff we threw in is it a little bit different than what you that you have, or tell me about what some of the major differences are from just and keep in mind this is just redraft scoring, just trying to it's almost like a it's a theory, a test, some kind of it's like we're putting this thing in the lab and for some testing to find out how we did or how close we are. We're not trying to match up, the first quarterback, the highest number quarterback with the highest number of defensive linemen or linebacker. We're not trying to get that, on par. We're just trying to make the league pretty much even. I don't want to have to draft Patrick Mahomes and a defensive player next to each other, at 101 and 102, or Josh Allen and, the best linebacker in the league. I don't want to do that where it's 100% even, but I do want to get the scoring to where most of the league is pretty much on par, where it's not. I noticed that in this league, a lot of defensive players weren't picked like round 8 or round 9 or something like that. And I was like, man, that's how did all the offensive players go? Are people more just familiar with offensive players? Did they overlook the defensive players? Is our scoring already wrong? Is the ADP on the sleeper site wrong? Like, what do we need to do to fix that, to close the gap a little bit between offensive and defensive players? But tell me about the scoring in this league.
Yeah, we can talk about that right now if you want, John, or you want to come back to that question about those guys going there. I had it on the show sheet for us to talk about that.
We'll do the scoring first. Yeah,
well, let's go. All right, we'll go scoring. We'll get back to that question. So this one, I thought you had set up the scoring, but I guess me and you were just throwing our options, our opinions, and what we did. So we kind of went with a little advanced scoring here. We wanted it to be a high scoring league. So there's a lot of bonuses in this one. We went your typical 1 point for 25 yards passing. We did 6 points for passing TD. I know some leagues are 4 or 5. We stayed at 6 on this one. We actually did 0.1 points per passing first down, which is something you don't typically see. We have -2 for a pick, -2 for a pick 6. So a pick 6 ends up getting you -4. 0.1 on passes completed, 0.1 on passes attempt, -1 on sacks. So quarterbacks are going to end up scoring a little higher here in this league. I don't know if it's the key is to have every position score the same. I think the idea is not to have any positions like completely become worthless because they're not scoring anything. So as long as all the quarterbacks are scoring close to each other, I think that makes more of a difference than is the quarterback scoring the exact same as a middle linebacker. So
Yeah.
rushing, then we went.
Well, hold on one second. The quarterbacks,
Yep.
like I guess in what I would look at is the passing first downs. I'd probably do like a 0.2 for those ones if it was my league kind of thing. And then what I like in my leagues is quarterback sack. Quarterbacks that hold on to the ball too long should be punished more than just -1 point for being sacked. So I like to add like -2 or -2.5 or -3 sometimes for quarterback sack. Some people hate that. They say it's an offensive lineman stat. It's not the quarterback's fault. I disagree with that. I understand it's probably not 50-50. It's probably more 70-20 or 70-30 quarterbacks holding the ball too long. There's some guys who can get rid of the ball really, really fast, who don't take sacks at all. I guess I look at that like in 1984, Dan Marino got sacked 8 times in an entire full season. He threw 5,000 some yards. So, if there's a really, really good quarterback who doesn't, who can get rid of the ball ASAP, not that anybody gets sacked only 8 times anymore, but at the same time, there's guys that definitely hold on to the ball too long. So I want to penalize those guys a little bit more than just -1 point. So that's my just contributions to the quarterback scoring.
Yeah, I don't mind the minus points on a sack. I'm probably the opposite of you. I don't mind the -1. It gets up a little higher. I've been in a league where it multiplies every sack in the game. And I actually had a game with Justin Fields last year, ran for over 100 yards and a touchdown and scored me -20 in a game. It was ridiculous. So, and like I said, it can go the other way too. So, running back, our everything for a running back is pretty typical of a regular league. The only addition for us is we have a 1 point per first down
I
and
love that.
0.1 yards per rushing attempt. So we got 0.1 on the rushing attempt there. Receiving, pretty typical, 1 point per first down is the only difference there. And then we have a 0.75 tight end bonus. So receptions, a tight end reception is 1.75.
Yeah, we did the rushing first downs because it's a mirror image of PPR. So a lot of these guys like Derrick Henry and the guys who carry the ball 30 times a game but don't really catch the ball too much. Them getting 15 first downs a game or 10 first downs a game is the same as a catch out of a running back for a catch out of the backfield for a running back. So I equivalent that to that those rushing first downs are a very important stat for me if you're going like a heavy RB build.
I've definitely come around to rushing and receiving first downs as points and points per carry. I mean, guys that their teams lean a little heavier on them, I think you should count. I mean, you're getting carries. So I definitely like that. I have a couple of my leagues on 0.25 or 0.2 points per carry. This one's 0.1, so a little less, but still something. Some leagues have half point per first down. This league, we're giving 1 point per first down. The one thing that we did on this league, which I know me and you, John, we put in heavy for this. We wanted to see a lot of bonuses, when they were. So this league actually has heavy bonus. 100 to 199 yards rushing is an extra 4-point bonus on top of your typical yardage. 200 yards is 8 points. So if you have a monster game, you're getting those full points for the 200 yards plus 8 points on top. Receiving is the same way. 100 to 199 is 4 points. 200 plus is 8 points. And then, John, you love the quarterback bonuses, which a lot of people don't do. We have 300 to 399 passing yards is 4 points, and over 400 passing yards is 6 points. I know you've pushed for the over 500 passing yard bonus, but they still do not have that on Sleeper yet. So we did get at least 4 points for the 300 to 399 and 6 points for the 400 plus. We also added 25 plus completions as a bonus 2 points. And if you're a running back, you get more than 20 carries in a game, you get another bonus 2 points for having 20 plus carries. So those are kind of our offense. So then we went defense. I always feel like people go too low on IDP scoring. their first year when they start out and they realize, oh man, these defensive guys aren't scoring what I thought they were. And then it's just really hard to trade them or figure out when to draft them. So we went pretty high on the defensive scoring. We went 6 points per sack. I know a lot of leagues will do more like 2 or 3 points per sack, but I look at it as if somebody has 18, 20 touchdowns in a season, that's a monster season. Well, that's the same for sacks on defense. You get 18, 20 sacks on defense, you're leading the league. 6 points per sack to me is a game changer. I like having it. That might be slightly high. We'll see at the end of the year if that's crazy high or not, but I like the idea of doing it. We actually added in yardage points too, which I've had leagues where I've had to adjust it because I've done yardage, and then guys are scoring like 48 points on defense because he had like a return, like a 60-yard fumble recovery. So we'll look and see how we want to do that. But right now we're giving 1 point for every 10 sack yards and 1 point for every 10 fumble return yards and interception return yards. So mind you here, if you get an interception return for a TD, 100-yard interception return for a TD would be 10 points plus the TD, which is 6. Plus, we actually did 6 points per interception, which I don't know if I've ever been in a league as 6 points per interception, but I'm liking it. I'm liking it. So you get a pick 6. That's a 100-yard pick 6 is a 22-point play. I love it.
Damn right.
I love it.
Should be.
That's a game changer. That's a game-changing play. A 100-yard return is a game-changing play. So I love it. So we've got 6 points on that. We really wanted to emphasize interceptions, fumbles, sacks, big plays, give you big points. 2 points per a tackle loss. So you get a guy tackle for a loss, 2 points. I like 1 point for a hit on a QB. That one we're going to have to look at. I've done some QB hit leagues, and I've had to adjust the scoring because sometimes guys can get 60, 70 hits in a year on a QB, but they only end up with like 10 sacks. So we're going to have to look at that one. I think I've had to make another league like a 0.1 or 0.2 on QB hits instead of a full point. So that might be one of those ones we have to adjust at the end of the year, depending on how high the scoring is. Block, punt, field goal. I'm gonna tell you that we went tackled up because we went farther down. We did it. We broke it into solo and assists. That's just a total tackle. You can get points for just set tackle, but we actually did solo tackle as 1 point total and assist tackles are different. So 6 points for the interception. Like I said, block, point, punt, field goal, PATs, 3 points. Like we said, the only thing we have lower on is fumble recovery. Right now is 3 points, but that's because they broke it into 2 things. So it's worth 6 points total. If you force the fumble and recover it, it's 6. But it's 3 for the fumble recovery and 3 for the forced fumble. So we kind of split that there. 3 points for a safety. An assisted tackle is 1. A solo tackle is 2. And pass defense is 3, which I like for the DBs. That's always nice. Plus, if you got defensive ends, guys get their hands up and knock the ball down, that considers a pass defense. So that's a nice little bonus there. I like that. This is what's going to be interesting. The 2 points for solo tackle, 1 for assist. This could put up some pretty high numbers. I'm in a lot of leagues where it's 1 for solo tackle, half a point for assist. I'm in another league, it's 1.5 solo and 1 point per assist. So 2 full points for solo tackle. I mean, you're getting guys up over 100 tackles a year. So I mean, you're looking at 200 plus points there, plus your assisted tackles, whatever's going. So it's going to be interesting. So I expect some very high scores coming through in this league. But that's kind of the breakdown we had. We went a little more turnover heavy with the sacks and interceptions. Like we said, we added first down bonuses and things on offense, and we try to do big yardage bonuses. So that's kind of the breakdown there. The QB hits is the one that's got me a little worried at 1 point per QB hit. That could end up making some of these defensive players worth a ton if they're rushing the passers. So I'm interested in looking at it. But again, that's why we're doing it this year in case we have some stat that's way off that throws off scoring, then we can always jump back in, adjust it for the next year. And then nobody feels like they got cheated. Because, John, you and I know when you're running a dynasty league, one of the hardest things to do in a dynasty league is to change scoring.
Yes.
Because people are like, well, that's not the scoring we started with. And I can't, well, I drafted this way and now you can't adjust it that way. Now, I'm in the boat as a commish. Sometimes you have to make scoring changes just to fix something that's wrong. I usually vote on most stuff, but I've actually had it in my IDP league, my home league that we started was my first IDP league ever. I'd never played in one. I wasn't sure how to set it up. I wasn't sure about the scoring system at all. So I way underestimated defensive scoring, and eventually I just made the commission rule because we had a couple of teams that just were ignoring defense, and we were like, you shouldn't be able to just get guys off waivers every week if that's your like. We're not really a true dynasty if that's how you're playing, where you can just grab a guy off where, and you can do that strategy, but it shouldn't be a winning strategy. That's all I'm saying. So we adjusted our scoring so that it made the defensive players a little more valuable. We had people hemming and hawing in the league. Like, I didn't know it was going to be worth that much. I would have got more defensive guys. But then I told people in advance, like, hey, we're changing the scoring. It's going to keep going up every year till it's equal. So you might want to start investing in some defensive players. So eventually we got through the hard times, and everybody likes it better now because you have to have an even roster. You can't just load up on offense and then have scrubs on defense and win. You just can't do that in my league. And I think that's the biggest thing in IDP leagues. You want to make sure the defense matters. That's why you're playing IDP.
It was super nice to have all the players in this league be pretty receptive to the redraft idea. First of all, for them to just say, yeah, let's just sit back for a year and find out how the scoring works. A lot of guys could be like, no, I don't want to be in this beginner league, or it's not for me. I want to jump right into dynasty. And when you have commissioner experience, like you mentioned before, how hard it is to change anything once things are set into place. Even adding so much like adding a flex player or changing a spot around, let alone scoring. You get the him and Han, like exactly like you said. I drafted this guy because he's going to get 20 sacks a year, especially if somebody that they drafted goes off year one when you first drafted. He had Nostradamus type vision. He saw everything coming from 5 years away. He knew what he was drafted for. So there may be one guy in the league who would probably lead the league if you change scoring because of what, how good he did or how good he drafted. So this redraft mentality that these guys were able to, digest and, so we could evolve the league into dynasty was, I thought as a commissioner, I thought it was pretty nice of all these guys who joined a dynasty league to be open to that concept.
Yeah, I was a little surprised, honestly. When you guys said it, I was like, I'll do it because I like the idea. But I was like, man, are guys going to draft 2 years in a row this huge, startup draft? So I was a little surprised guys would do it. But I was pumped that nobody really complained about it, and then we did it. So it's good to go for me. So I was going to break down. So we just broke down our scoring. So I was going to break down our starting lineups. So we decided to go a 10 and 10 here. We're on Sleeper. And I will bring this up for people watching the stream. Sleeper, IDP, and My Fantasy League, IDP, or Reality Sports Online, IDP, are very different depending on how you play in the league. And I'll explain that as we get going with some of these things because they can change your draft strategy or what players you're taking or not playing. So I'll go over that a little bit. But so what we have 10 offensive starters, 10 defensive starters, which I love, equal amount of starters on both sides. I know a lot of leagues that start out with just a couple IDP guys to kind of get their feet wet. And I feel like it just waters it down so much. Like it's not as important because you just pick up guys because everybody's only starting 2 or 3 defensive guys. I was in a league that tried that and it got voted out after 2 years. People were like, why are we even messing with these IDP guys? Because we only started 1 or 2 every week.
Right.
So people just were like, this is not really adding anything to it. So they got rid of it, which I can understand. And that's why I always tell people, don't do a league where you start 12 or 13 offensive guys and 3 or 4 defensive guys. It will never work. People will just be like, why are we even messing with this IDP? I think you got to make it equal. Now, I've been in leagues that start 10 offense and 8 defense. I can see that. So that's not as bad, but definitely do not make it half because then you're just going to find that people are not taking the defensive guys seriously at all. So go back. So we got 10 offense, 10 defense, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flex, and 1 super flex in the starting lineup for offense. Defense, we decided because we are on Sleeper. And so if anybody ever talks about true position and you're not aware of what they're talking about, you're like, what does he keep saying true position? So a true position IDP league means you actually have to play everyone's exact position. So you have to play a defensive tackle. You have to play a defensive end. You have to play a linebacker. You have to play a cornerback. You have to play a safety. So that's true position. Sleeper doesn't have true position. They just clump everybody together. So if you're a D lineman, your inside guy or outside guy, you're a DL, D lineman only. Linebackers are just LBs. Defensive backs are all DBs. They're all, doesn't matter if you're a safety or a corner, you're all DB. The one thing Sleeper does do, though, is they do a linebacker / D line for guys like TJ Watt that play in a 3-4 are basically a defensive end who's rushing the passer 90% of the time. They will make that guy a linebacker defensive lineman. So that's a little bit of difference on your drafting strategy, just to kind of put that out for everyone. So our defense, we actually started 3 D linemen, 3 linebackers, 2 defensive backs, and then we have 2 flex where you can do anything, 25 bench spots, 5 IR spots. And as we talked about, this is a first-year redraft league where we'll turn year 2 into new draft with Dynasty. We will most likely keep starting lineups, those things the same. We're really more looking at it for scoring purposes, making sure everything kind of works out, as I just broke down all the scoring to you on there. What do you think, John? Do you want to take a look at this draft board and kind of walk people through a little bit what happened, or is there a couple more questions you got before we do that?
No, the only thing I had was I had so many questions as being a football player and a coach, and just like yourself, coaching your kids, watching football, playing football, knowing the positions on both sides of the ball. I was kind of concerned about what happens then when somebody lands up in a 4-3 and then it turns into a 3-4 and vice versa. When they shade the defense, where do these guys get points for? When you're a 3-4 linebacker that lines up in line of scrimmage on a blitz, is that considered defensive lineman now because you lined up on the ball? Like, how is that scoring going to change? But Sleeper does have kind of, they need a lot of. Sleeper is a great platform, but they're not MFL as far as, and I'm not a big fan of MFL, but I'm a big fan of MFL settings. Sleeper does a pretty good job of like separating this stuff, but they have a lot of work to do to catch up to some of the other sites that are able to itemize and distinguish players' positions and where they're lined up at and what they are and how to, like true position stuff. So it's still kind of vague. I just feel like it's so much easier to use Sleeper, but man, I wish that if they could just import MFL settings on the Sleeper, or if MFL had a better app to go with their site. I mean, one of those two is like, the best of both worlds there. So
I know.
I just wish that
I always explain this to people because I always bring up MFL or Sleeper, and depending on what you're playing on, because it makes a difference. So a big change Sleeper made last year, if you're in IDP, they made anyone who's a rush outside end a defensive end. So if you're playing on my fantasy league, Max Crosby's a D end, TJ Watt's a D end, Alex Highsmith's a D end, anyone in a 3-4. Daniil Hunter is now a D end. He was a D end that became a linebacker that went back to D end. So what they've done on MFL is they finally made the change that anyone who's considered more of a outside rusher who's attacking the quarterback, they have now made that person a D end. So if you're an outside linebacker in a 3-4, you're now considered a D end on MFL. And if you're a defensive end in a 4-3, you're a D end. Now, where that makes a big difference is defensive tackles. So defensive tackles before, you're basically getting only nose guards or like 3 techniques were the only guys considered defensive tackles in the past. Well, because of this change, anyone that's in the interior is considered a defensive tackle. So what that means is, and I always bring up the Steelers because I'm a Steelers guy and it's easier reference for me. So Cam Hayward used to be a defensive end. Now he's considered a defensive tackle on my fantasy league because he still plays technically defensive end for the Steelers, but he's in a 3-4 system. So he's playing on the inside with a guy outside him most of the time. So he's considered a defensive tackle. So what you want to get is you want to get those defensive tackles that still rush the passer. Guys like him, guys like Christian Wilkins. I always bring up Darius Robinson out of Missouri, who went to the Arizona Cardinals in the draft. He is now considered a defensive tackle, even though he's more of that 3-4 defensive end. So that's a big difference on my fantasy league where they don't even look at that on Sleeper. If you're on the D line, you're a D lineman. They don't distinguish whatsoever in that.
How does Fantrax have their scoring setup? Are they any more different than this, or are they the same, or they have their own?
That is an absolute fantastic question. I need to look into that because I'm not in an IDP league on Fantrax. So I need to look at how they have it broke down. I am in Reality Sports Online, a couple IDP leagues. Now, the nice thing about Reality Sports Online, if you've ever played on there, they actually allow the commissioners to have power to go change a guy's position, which is really nice. So I can go in and I can say, hey, league, we're going to make every outside linebacker in a 3-4 a D end. And I can tell the league that, and I can make the changes on that. Because I will tell you, it makes a huge difference whether you're starting TJ Watt as a defensive end or you're starting TJ Watt as a linebacker. It makes a difference because if you can start him a DN because he's mostly getting his points from sacks, if you can start him as a DN and pile up tacklers in your linebacker spots, that's really what you want to do. A lot of times you don't want to be playing guys that are sack reliant in linebacker spots because you're going to have big hit or miss weeks. Where defensive ends, you kind of expect those hit or miss weeks. So we made that change in my Reality Sports League, IDP league I run. We made that last year to match my fantasy league. So what I told people was like, hey, I'm going to switch the guys here to match what they're doing in my fantasy league. And part of the reason I did that is because we have a true scoring league and that we start defensive tackle and cornerback where you have to start those positions. So that's where I made that adjustment.
Is that an annually change, or is that a weekly change you could do on there? Because as a commissioner, it just seems like someone like, he played defensive end this week. Why is he lined up as a linebacker?
No, we make it at the beginning of the year. So if somebody has a question on a guy, I'm like, hey, he's listed as this. If you want to leave him at the listed position on Reality Sports Online, I'll let you do it, but then he stays the whole year. Okay. So if I have a guy that I'm like, hey, he technically should be defensive tackle, I'm going to make a D tackle, but he's listed as a DN, and they say, I want to leave him at DN, then I let him leave him.
Okay.
You know, if somebody's listed at linebacker, I'm like, hey, you can adjust that guy to a defensive end, but they look at their lineup and they're like, hey, man, I really need him as a linebacker to fill my lineup. I let him keep it on there if it's that way. I also do the same thing with rookies. So I tell guys at the beginning of the draft, like, hey, depending on where these guys get drafted, especially defensive ends, outside linebackers, it might change what their position is. So be aware of that. And so a lot of guys kind of take that in consideration. But with the fact that I made outside linebacker and DN the same thing, where you can make a guy that's a rush in a DN, it's definitely helped with the drafting. Before, people are like, well, crap, I don't want to take this guy if he's going to end up on a team where he has to get listed as a linebacker. I want him as a DN. So that's also helped in that aspect of things.
Okay, great. All right, so let's go over the draft board. I'll tell you what we'll do here, JT, is I'll do my first 5 picks, you do your first 5 picks, and we'll keep going back and forth until like our rosters are done, and then we'll go over like where the first defensive player was picked at and things like that, and where defense really kind of implemented or started entering the draft kind of thing. Is that okay?
Yep, sounds good, John. I got the draft board pulled up here. You were pick number 1. I was pick number 3, so now I feel even better that we weren't commissioners, so we didn't actually feel like people were cheating, that we were cheating them, getting 1 and 3. So that makes me feel better. So you do your picks, and I'll scroll through here as we talk about the picks.
I love drafting number 12. When I get the one spot, I hate it anyway, so there's no collusion involved here because I was like, shit. But the only benefit of being drafted number 1 is you get Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, one of those guys. If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, you can get Hurts, vice versa. And this is redraft, remember, too. It's not dynasty, so some of these picks may seem a little bit weird to the people who are more dynasty-minded, but either way, redraft dynasty, Josh Allen's probably 101 and a 6-point scoring touchdown, and what we have for carries and first downs and stuff. So, and it's a tight end premium league. So my first 5 picks were Josh Allen, Sam Laporta, Garrett Wilson, Dalton Kincaid, and DJ Moore. That's 1-1-1, 2-12, 3-1, 4-12, no third-round reversal. And then 5-1 was DJ Moore. I'm going to cheat a little bit more and say I took Evan Ingram in round 6 just because. So I got Josh Allen, Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Evan Ingram, Garrett Wilson, and DJ Moore as my first 5 picks of this draft. So no defensive players at all. JT, let's go to first 6 rounds. How did you do?
Yeah, I like what you did there, John, with the 3 tight ends. You went tight end heavy and the wide receivers to go with Allen. I liked it. And I will, like you said, remind people, strategy was slightly different for me in this, knowing that this was going to be a 1 year and done, and then throw it all back in for a dynasty next year. So I did draft slightly differently in this than I would have if it was a clear full dynasty starting this year. Just so in case people are like, well, why did you go that guy? I didn't mind taking older players in this because I knew we were throwing them back. So I kind of had a little more of a, I'd say I had a little more of a redraft mindset because of the way we talked about with the redraft. So for me, I picked out of the 3 slot. I took Jalen Hurts here. If it was Dynasty, I might have gone a different direction here, to be honest with you. But I liked Hurts here with just the way everything was kind of set up. Like you said, points per carry, the first downs, QBs getting those. In a lot of leagues, they don't, but we got him in this. So I took him there. I knew if I didn't take Trevor Lawrence at the end of the second, you were absolutely taking him 2 picks later. And I knew he wouldn't get back to me in the third. So I went and took Trevor Lawrence because I absolutely knew you were going to take him. So I took T-Law there at 210, which I actually felt really fantastic about getting him at 210. I've been in some leagues where I'm getting way later lately. It's pretty amazing to me. But I got him in the second. Had to go with my guy JT in the third. I think he's in for a big bounce back year. I would have taken him this high in full dynasty as well as redraft. So we got him in the third. Michael Pittman in the fourth at 410. Came back with Devontae Smith at 5'3" with a little nice my stack with Jalen Hurts there in the 5th round. Obviously would have loved to get A.J. Brown, but that was my only thing that would have got me not to take Lawrence as if A.J. Brown would have got to me. He went 2 picks before me, so I went with Lawrence, and then I figured I'd just take Devontae Smith later, which I did. Came back Najee at 6'10", maybe a little early in a dynasty, to be honest with you, but with the way the running backs were coming off the board, I wanted a second set running back, and with it being redraft style, I like that. So I went with Najee there in the 6th. So I went 2 QBs, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. You went 1 QB, 2 wide receivers, and 3 tight ends in the first 6 rounds.
Yeah, so no defensive players were picked off the board in the first 6 rounds across the board with nobody. So as we go to round 7 to let's go 7 we'll go 7 to 14. I went Chris Godwin, and then at 701 Deshaun Watson because it's a super flex, so I love quarterbacks. He's my second quarterback, which I'm not. I know you're not a big Watson fan. I like him a lot, but I'm in reality starting to set in right now where he's probably going to be 15 to 20 quarterback-ish. Like it's. And maybe I should wait a little bit too long for quarterback, but this is redraft, so whatever mistakes I make, they can be changed. Then I went JSN in 901, Jonathan Brooks at 10, Pat Freiermuth 11, Rashee Rice at 12, and Christian Watson at 13, and Sam Darnold at 14. Because I figured he'd start at least half the games this year, and if he does more, then it's just nothing but gravy in the Navy. So that's quarterback, wide receiver, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, which Jonathan Brooks is my first running back off the board, and he might not even play for a couple games. Pat Freiermuth, Rashee Rice, Christian Watson, Sam Darnold. So I did not take any defensive players yet. JT, enter the Dynasty IDP League with some defensive players for us, please.
Yeah, so defensive players started coming off the board in the middle of the 7th round, which I feel is about right. 7th, 8th round. So typically in most IDP leagues, this is one of the number one questions I get from IDP people. People are like, hey, where should I start taking defensive players? That's always the thing is like, people are like, where should I go? It really depends on your scoring system and the amount of starters, everything else. And I hate to say that because it's kind of a cop out. But I will say, I think the 7th, 8th round is pretty good. Typically, how you want to look at it is you want to have almost your entire offensive starting roster put together before you start going defense. Now, I think you can jump out and take 1 or 2 defensive players before maybe you have your last 2 flex positions picked. If you see some guys you like at later value and you want to try to get some of the top high-end defensive guys, I think that's a good strategy. But I think typically that's where people kind of look at it is like once I'm close to finishing my starting roster on offense is where I want to start drafting defensive guys and seeing guys kind of come off the board. And that's kind of where we saw here. 7th round, 7-6, Alo Gokun, who I always jack up his name for Jacksonville. He's been one of the leading tackler in the league the last couple of years, one of the top IDP scores, 2 tackles, 2 points per solo tackle, 1 for assist. I think that's totally a good place to take him. He's wrapped up 160 some plus tackles the last couple of years. So that's a guy that's going to score for you. And depending on how the scoring works out, there's a chance he could end up being up there near some of the starting quarterbacks if he has a big year. So he went there. Then Roquan Smith, who I think, pretty much for most people are the 1 and 2 for off-ball linebacker. Some people would take Roquan first, but those are, I think, the top 2 guys. Michael Parsons. So Parsons is a little weird because in Sleeper, he's considered an LB but / D line, so you can actually play him on D line. I have seen some leagues where he's only linebacker, which I think hurts because really he's more of a defensive end because he's rushing the ball all the time. So in my mind of fantasy leagues and my RSO leagues, I actually have changed him to D end in those leagues. So he's a D end. Hutchinson, D line, as again, we said on Sleeper, no D end, D tackle designation is just defensive line. So that's when we started seeing the top end guys there. So Crosby also went off in that round. So we started seeing, what was it? We saw the first 7 defensive players, all the high end guys. They all came off the board within like 9-10 picks of each other.
And this is nice because these are names that even myself, not an IDP guy, are familiar and comfortable with. Like, I love Roquan Smith, Michael Parsons. These guys are all people that they're household names as far as I'm concerned. So they're great players. They're easy to draft because you know who they are. You see them being the number 1 players. Can you explain to people how many of these guys are what's called a green dot player? Like who's the guy that has from what I understand, what I was told this offseason is that you want to draft these green dot players first. And are all the guys drafted this early green dot players?
Typically, the green dot is the guy he's going to call the defense. And because he's calling the defense, that means he's going to be on the field all the time. So that's what they talk about when they talk about green dot. Like on offense, it's the quarterback that has the system where they could call the play in. He can hear it in his helmet. The green dot is the guy on defense that can hear the play called into his helmet. So typically that guy is on the field all the time. It's usually a linebacker, though there are some situations where it will be a DB. I know like Xavier McKinney had the green dot last year for the Giants as a safety for a while. So that it can happen, but it's typically your inside off the ball linebacker most of the time. So Alakun, Roquan Smith, they'll be your green dot guys. The D linemen typically aren't. So like Crosby, Parsons, Hutchins, Garrett, Watt, typically those guys aren't. But when you get somebody, when they're talking about that, it's usually when you're getting into those situations where teams are only playing two linebackers, or when they go to nickel or dime, you want to get the guy that has a green dot because he's the guy that's staying on the field the whole time. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what people mean by the green dot. And typically it's linebacker and off the ball middle linebackers are who we're discussing there.
Yeah, when you think about the line of when you think about the line of scrimmage, a quarterback can make adjustments. The running back can hear him. All the offensive linemen can hear him. He knows the play. He can signal to the wide receivers. A linebacker could do the same thing where he could talk to the defensive lineman, look left, look right, change the play to all the linebackers, and throw up hand signals for anything the defensive back adjustments also. So it makes sense to have someone in the middle of the field to have the green dot to be able to call all the plays and be able to communicate well with the entire defense.
Yep, and when you're going IDP, typically the idea is you want off the ball linebackers that make a lot of tackles, or you want guys that get to the quarterback and get sacks. Especially since we went 6 points per sack in this league. Also, you got to realize a sack, fumble, and recovery. So say you get a sack, you force the fumble, and you recover it. That's a 12-point play plus yardage if it's a deep sack, plus the tackle for the lost side. So, I mean, you in one play technically could score anywhere between 15, 16, 17 points on one play. So that's why people are thinking you can, if you have a big game as a defensive end, there was like a game last year with Khalil Mack. Yeah, just had a monster game for the Chargers. I think he had like 4 sacks. He ended up scoring like 60 some points in one of my leagues. It was crazy. So that's where you're seeing you can get that high end. Now, the guys that get sacks are going to have games where they don't get you much if they don't get a sack. But the one nice thing is you get some monster performances. So that's what you saw. You saw the top 2 tacklers go off the board, and then it was the top rushers. So you got Crosby, Parsons, Hutchinson, Garrett, Watt, and Bosa, and then Allen, who's now I think Allen Hurts. He just went with the dash, the 2 last names. But those, as you saw, was all the rushers, all white in a row. Christian Kirk was the only guy that kind of broke that up. Everything else was defense. So that's what you kind of get. And when it got back to me, I usually try to want to be at the front end of a defensive run if I can help it. If I'm too late, I kind of missed it. I thought about in the 7th. I'll go through my guys and talk about it here. So in the 7th, I went Jordan Addison at 7-3. I was highly debating going defense there. But I thought, maybe it'll get back to me and I can start the run in the 8th. Well, 2 picks later, they started the defensive run, so I missed out. So that one got me. I regretted that one immediately. I was like, I knew I should have went defense at 7-3. It was a little early, but I had a feeling I might miss the run, and I missed the run. So it got back to me in the 8th. Obviously, still good players available there. A lot of the high-end defensive rushers were off the board. So I went Zaire Franklin from the Colts, who's been a tackling machine the last couple of years, especially with Jack Leonard gone. And then one of my favorite guys who's a little bit down this year, not a lot, but he had some injuries last year, so it pushed him down some people's boards, and that's Nick Bolton for the Chiefs. Absolute beast. The guy's young in a dynasty. I think Bolton probably goes a little earlier than this. He probably goes in front of Franklin because he's about 3 or 4 years younger than him. But with this being redraft style, you saw people not afraid to jump in and take, a few of the older guys like Roquan and TJ Watt and Myles Garrett and Bosa, because they're like, hey, it's a one and done for me. I'm going to get as many points as I can. So that's kind of where we started the run. I went those 2 defensive. I went all ball linebacker for both those spots. Then I wanted the triple stack with Goddard there in the 10th round to go with Hurts and Smith. So I took him. I came back. I thought about taking Bobby Okereke there, and then I didn't, and took Goddard just in case. Well, you grabbed my guy Muth in the 11th, so that kind of got me. So then I came back and I took Queen, who he's kind of all over people's boards. He's over from the Ravens. People are like, is he going to be as good? Not next to Roquan. I think he's still going to be a stud for the Steelers. So I got him at 11-3, and I kind of went with the idea that a lot of the the pass rushing defensive players were off the board. So I started loading up on off the ball linebackers. And so I went Queen there then in the 11th round. And then 12th round, I went Trey Benson, rookie running back out of Florida State. We're starting to run low on RBs there. I really like him a ton, so I grabbed him there. And then at that point, I hadn't taken QB since the 2nd round. A lot of teams needed QB at this point, so that's where I jumped on Russell Wilson. If it was a dynasty, I probably would have not done that. I definitely would have taken Fields first. Fields went 2 picks later. I was hating myself after that. I was like, I should have just taken Fields.
Right.
I thought he maybe would get back to me in the next round and I could go back-to-back Wilson and Fields. Didn't happen. So then in the 14th round, then I grabbed CJ Mosley, an older guy. He's in his early 30s now. But again, he's just a tackle machine. And with it being a one-and-done redraft, I just loaded up everything I could on off the ball inside linebackers to try to take advantage of that. It was 2 points per solo tackle and 1 point per assist.
Yeah, that's I right after those rounds were over with, I kind of went Jerome Ford first because I really kind of needed some running backs. I'm a running. I like running backs, but I understand their position in the world of dynasty. I should have, in a redraft format, I should have started earlier because I'm not sure how much Jerome Ford's going to be playing this season, but it is what it is. And then I started switching to defense. Then I'm like, okay, I got everything. I need the defense to go through. So I got Terrell Dotson from Seattle, and then you could Julian Love also from Seattle. So then I got Levante David. I'm not sure. This is me just kind of like guessing with IDP and Joshua Metellus. So these are some defensive players that started going off the board on my rosters. So then I came back to running back, Antonio Gibson, Michael Mayer, Tank Bigsby, Michael Wilson, and around 27. And then from there, I just kind of piecemealed a handful of later draft defensive linemen and they fill my roster with at the end of the draft. But I kind of went offense the entire first half of the draft and probably then some. And then I just started pasting in defense. How did I do on defense, by the way? Just because, can you kind of go over the guys I picked? Because I don't really know much about them. This is my first year. So how did I do?
Yeah, I don't think it was a terrible idea to wait, especially if you miss those couple runs early on defensive players. There's going to be other guys there. It's just maybe they don't have as high upside. So I didn't hate your strategy at all where you went on stuff. You kind of went tight end early, which made some other people go tight end where they had to because they're running out. You went a little late on running back, so like you were saying, both with me is like I got to drop. I got to grab somebody here. But then you went defense. Dotson's an interesting situation. Seattle's a little bit of a mess in that we don't know what's happening there on all the defensive guys, new players, new coaching staff. Dotson, I think, could end up having a really good year, but we just don't 100% know who's wearing the green dot, what's going on. But I do like his chances of being the main guy there. Love, I think, will get a ton of playing time. He's been a stud at DB. DBs are hard as well as a lot of IDP. People kind of ignore defensive back and take them late, and they say that, because defensive back scoring is very inconsistent year to year. Sometimes guys, depending on turnovers, have big years, and then the next year their tackle numbers or their turnovers dip just a bit, and so their scoring will go down. So I know a lot of people who don't like to take DB early because of this. I still want good DBs, so I'm not just going to wait and take whoever's left. So I'm a little more DB friendly on this. So you took a DB in the 17th and Love. I actually followed you right up. Jesse Bates went with the next pick, who's a really good pick at 17-2. I went Minkah Fitzpatrick at 17-3, hoping for a bounce back year for him. He was awesome last year when he was healthy, but he missed quite a few games, so that hurt him a little bit. He's a free safety, so he plays deep, but he just makes so many plays that to me he's worth that, which most people tell you want to get a box safety for the tackle upside. So then you went David, which I think, he's an older player, but in a redraft, I think he's going to get a lot of tackles for Tampa. So I think that's really nice value there in the 18th. I came back and took McKinney, another defensive back in the 18th. I just like Fitzpatrick and McKinney. I just think they're playmakers. So those are two guys that I kind of have a lot of shares of. Metellus is an interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
So now we're talking about some of these guys. I love Minkah Fitzpatrick, and talk about a football player. That just oozes like football. Now, the problem is some of these guys in an IDP scoring, when you're a really good football player and you are just a shutdown cornerback, or you're just a player like Fitzpatrick where a lot of the defenses kind of play around you. Does that hinder these guys scoring on an IDP basis?
It can. The guys you want to avoid are like shutdown cornerbacks. Because those guys, they're great players in the real life NFL, but no one's throwing at them. So you almost want the guy on the opposite side of the shutdown cornerback if you have to play cornerback. I'm probably not taking a lot of cornerbacks in a sleeper league where they don't have cornerback designation. I'm probably typically taking safeties as much as I can. There's a handful of cornerbacks that play nickel slot that I would take because they get enough tackles and they are in the run game and they do play close to the line. So there's a few guys I'll take, but for the most part, I'm probably avoiding cornerback when it comes to a sleeper IDP league because of that reason.
When a running back gets through the D-line, gets through linebackers, and the safety's one-on-one, he gets a solo tackle for that. He's getting 2 points for every tackle he makes with something that bleeds through the interior front. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. So those guys can make tackles, especially with all the passing. So you can get those guys to get a lot of tackles on the secondary. You're hoping for takeaways. That's where a lot of the secondary guys make their money. Jesse Bates had a monster year last year for Atlanta, and it's because he was getting all kinds of takeaways, interceptions, fumble recoveries, those types of things. So that really helped his year. So Metellus is an interesting guy because he actually lists as defensive back / linebacker. So that's kind of nice for you in those bye weeks. Gives you a little chance to kind of move guys around a little bit. So he actually goes for both. So I like that pick by you in the 19th. Then you went Roshan, Gabe Davis, help your offense. Kevin Byrd's another one. He's played safety most of his career. There are some reports that the Bears are going to have him play the slot corner position there, which I am in a couple start cornerback leagues where I grabbed him for sure because I loved his upside at that slot corner for a cornerback spot. So it's not as great here and because of us not having to start cornerback, but I still think he has a shot to get enough look as a DB that that's a good pick. Demario Davis is another one. So you went with some of the older guys with like Levante David. Some of these guys, are going to drop in Dynasty just because they're older players. I think Davis is 34 now, but the guy just keeps making tackles. So for you to get him in the 23rd of what was basically a redraft league, I like that move. The guy makes plays, and you got him. You got him way cheaper than a lot of these other guys who probably are not going to make as many tackles as he does throughout the year. So you went real heavy there, which I liked. Then you went back to offense, and then came back to defense with some of your D line. You went with a couple of the young guys, Murphy, the rookie for Seattle, Robinson, who I love, rookie from Arizona, and then Chase Young, a guy, you know, at this round 30, if he ends up just bombing out after the injury and doing nothing, I don't feel like you wasted much here taking him in the 30th round. If he ends up somehow getting into that top 5 player that he was drafted, you got to steal. So I think, you took some risks here, but I think it was worth it, especially in the redraft, to kind of see where some of these guys go. Wilson at linebacker for Arizona. He's a big what if right now. People aren't sure if he's going to be the man or not there. So that one's one you're going to have to keep an eye on. If he ends up being the green dot and starter there, then you got to steal here in the 31st round for him. If he ends up not being the guy and he ends up only playing maybe 30 or 40% of snaps, then he might be a guy you're looking to replace down the line. Same thing, Moreau at Buffalo. They lost a lot of their guys. He moves over there. What kind of playing time he sees, we're just not 100% sure right now. Also, we got to remind people we did do this draft quite a bit ago, like earlier in the summer. So some of these guys, we didn't 100% know what position they were going to be on, or where, like, a lot of these other guys who signed late for free agency, where they were signing, because we did it kind of pretty close to after the draft. So it was a little earlier in the summer, just in case people were like, man, I'm surprised that guy went that high. He's not going that high now. That's where you're probably seeing some of those differences.
Later in round 42, I got the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. So
yep. So then you just kind of went DB heavy at the end, which I think a lot of people love that strategy. They take all their players up front, and then they say, hey, I'm just going to swing on a bunch of defensive backs all at the end of the draft. Whoever hits, I keep. Whoever doesn't, I drop, and I pick up somebody else. So I think that's not a bad strategy at all. Nate Hobbs, he's one of those guys I talked about. That's a nickel corner. He's going to play the slot. I like him. He plays cornerback, but he also will make plenty of tackles, so I like him. Tariq Woolen's an interesting one. He's going to play on the outside. He was great as a rookie, not as good as next year. So he's one to keep an eye on. If they throw at him a lot, he might be worth keeping because of pass deflections and tackles. If they don't go to him, I'd rather have Devin Witherspoon in that Seattle defensive backfield, just because he's going to be the slot corner there. But one could be interesting. Gilman's super underrated for the Chargers. Actually, was talking about this on Shoot the Gap with Jorge here on Fantasy and Frames on last Wednesday. He actually was the leading tackler of all their defensive backs last year. I did not realize that. So that's a really nice steal there at 41. The Honey Badger at 42. He has a chance to get some turnovers, real big play. If he doesn't, he's getting older. You didn't hurt yourself at 42. And then Douglas going from Green Bay, to Buffalo. If he doesn't kick and punt return yards, that will be nice for you over there, as he's been a solid guy in the past for that. And then you finish it off with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then Graham, defensive lineman for the Falcons, who could give you a little bit of rush there. So I don't hate the strategy the way you did it. I think you mixed in some guys late. You kind of went defense heavy late. I think I would have probably done the same thing, especially as my first IDP league. I would have jumped in late on defensive guys, not wanting to overdraft them. And again, you got some good guys. You got some good older players that I think actually are going to score really solid for you, even though you took them way late, even though they were later picks. I think you're going to end up being pretty happy with what you ended up with there. I kind of did a little more of the in-between. If you go back and look at what I did after I took Minka and McKinney, I came back with Musgrave at tight end because I realized at this point I only had one tight end and they were starting to dry up real quick. So I threw Musgrave in there. Matabuke, bunch of sacks as a defensive lineman for the Ravens last year in a defensive tackle start league. He is awesome. You want him. He's one of the top 3 guys that should be off the board because he's a defensive tackle that can get you sacks. Not quite as important in this league because it's just a start D line league. But like I said, early on, a lot of the pass rushers went. So we started getting a little thin at pass rushing. So that's where I looked and said, oh, I'm going to go defensive tackle and get a guy that I know I can get, hopefully get double digit sacks from. So that's where I went my Matabuke there. Came back, looking at my wide receivers, could use a little help. Xavier Leggett was still sitting there. At that point, I only had 3 wide receivers, so I didn't even have my flex play wide receiver yet. So that's where I went Leggett because I looked at it, I was like, oh, I better get someone that can be a backup for me. So I went with him. Dallas Turner, the rookie out of Minnesota, he goes linebacker D line here. I think he goes earlier, possibly, if this is full dynasty. I think redraft these rookies fell a bit because people are like, oh, we'll see if they work out this year, and then I'll draft them higher next year if I need to. So I got Turner at 22, hoping he could kind of be replace Hunter at the defensive end spot to get some of those pass rushes for Minnesota. Kane Ellis from Atlanta, I went with him. He's in a 3-headed monster there for linebackers with Troy Anderson, who went 3 picks before him. And then they've also got Nate Landman there in Atlanta. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Right now, Landman claims he's going to be the green dot, which I found was interesting. Peyton Wilson, I went him for the Steelers, the rookie linebacker at 24. I really like what he's going to do in the future. And like I said, a lot of the pass rushing guys were gone. So I started going more interior rush guys at this point to kind of fill out my roster. Went Dexter Lawrence.
Quick question real fast.
Yep.
Guys like Peyton Wilson who come in the league at like the age 24-ish kind of, is that as bad as like when a running back comes in at like 22, 23 or 4? Because now when linebackers take a lot of beating too, so especially like interior linebackers. So when that happens, you get a guy like Peyton Wilson who's already 24 in the rookie season. How big of a red flag is that, or is it really not that big of a red flag at all?
I think he's a combo guy in that he's a red flag all around because all the injuries he had in college. So that kind of hurts him. But when he was healthy, he was spectacular. I mean, he was the defensive player of the year, a linebacker of the year in college. I mean, the guy's got unbelievable skills. His 40 time is off the charts. So the guy's got a ton of ability. I look at it, the Steelers got him in the 3rd round, which I kind of felt like it was a steal. If it wasn't for the age and injury concerns, I think he's a late 1st, early 2nd round pick. So I think the Steelers looked at it like, hey, if we can get 3-4 good years out of him, maybe he doesn't give us a decade in the league. But if we can get like 3, 4, 5 like super productive years out of him, we'll feel like it was worth it in the 3rd round. And I really think he ends up winning that 2nd starting linebacking spot next to Patrick Queen on the inside for the Steelers. I just think he has so much ability. The guy's a hard worker. I just think he ends up winning that spot. I like Rolando Roberts, but he's basically a run at the see ball, run at ball guy. Like he's great against the run, but he's not giving you much in pass coverage. He doesn't give you much else other than kind of filling the line and making that tackle. Wilson's just so much more athletic and versatile. So that's why I think that happens there. So, nice. but that's why I'm on Wilson. I just think I can get a couple really good years out of it. And I'm going with the upside. Now, he also comes with significant risk that those injuries just continue to pop up over and over and over again. And he never sees consistent time in the NFL. So, that's definitely a spot too where you can say, hey, I don't want to take a chance, so I'm avoiding him. A couple more guys I jumped in here. Kenny Moore is another guy. It's a cornerback that technically plays that corner slot for the Colts. He gets a ton of tackles. The Colts pretty much play 1 or 2 linebackers only, so Moore's always on the field as that slot corner, kind of playing that weak side linebacker almost. So I grabbed him there. I actually, Julian Blackman went around later to our guy, Dynasty Guru NFL. I actually, once I took Moore, I was like, man, I maybe should have taken Blackman before him. So I was kind of upset at myself. I was like, oh, I took Moore and I probably should have taken Blackman. If it was Dynasty for sure, I would have taken Blackman first because he's younger. Yeah. But I went with Moore because he's pretty consistent. And then just kind of filled it out. It's a bunch of young wide receivers since I went QB or defense a little earlier. So I missed on some wide receivers. So I had to go younger guys late. And then I kind of just started filling things in. I took Reed Blankenship for Philly. Really nice year last year as a safety. So grabbed him. Like I said, tight end was getting sparse. So I took Jelani Woods as my third tight end and then went back to the D-line. Payne for Washington, another interior guy, but puts pretty good pressure on the quarterback and can rush from there. So I grabbed him, grabbed Dax Hill. I'm not 100% sure what Cincinnati's going to do with him this year. Makes me a little bit nervous, but he had a pretty solid season last year, so grab him. Drew Lock, another backup QB. Ebakum, who already is out for the year. So I've already had to make our first move in this year and drop him because he's out for the season. Obviously, I would just put him on IR if it wasn't going to be a redraft, but I just dropped him with the Achilles injury. And then kept adding to those interior D linemen that can kind of rush the quarterback with Cam Hayward.
Man, he's like 35 years old or something.
He's right there. So again, he's a guy in Dynasty you're probably not taking or taking really late because you don't know how much more you're getting out of him. I figure if I get one good year out of him this year, I'll take it in the 37th round. So I grabbed him. And this is where I kind of took the older guys. I took Jordan Poyer moving on to Miami. He's an older player. I think he's 32 or 33. But he's been really solid in the past. Justin Simmons, still not signed by anyone. Thought he'd be signed by now. Took him in the 43rd and then went the opposite way and took the rookie Kitchens for the Rams with my last pick in the 45th. I think he's going to get a decent shot to play a lot as their third safety. So kind of went there with a young guy to add all these old guys I went with late in the draft.
Yeah, there's definitely a deep draft, and you know when you're in the offseason, drafts like this are absolutely fantastic. When you draft 45, 55, 65 rounds of these drafts. I mean, I didn't get sick of drafting at all. A lot of these guys are from overseas, from Germany, and where's a couple of these that are Germany. I think there's 4 guys who are not on American soil here in this draft, 4 or 5 of them. So it worked out pretty nice that there was no timer. Just take your time, tag the next guy. You know. It gets, if you're in like 4 or 5 of these drafts like this where there's no timer, it gets pretty old. But this one, we had nothing but time. I had a couple drafts going on, but some finished when this draft started. Some started out before this draft was over with. But this was a nice like plug-in for the summertime. So it was nice to get to know these players, get familiar with them, and spend about a couple weeks to draft in this league. Also, looking forward to doing a dynasty version of it next year when I'm a little more familiar with all these people. But this was a pretty fun draft, to be honest with you. For my infancy, or my baptism into the IDP world, I really look forward to this, and it was really interesting. I was super happy I did it.
I thought I was really surprised when we went no timer. I was like, oh man, this is going to be brutal. But it actually went really well. People were drafting fairly quickly and were pretty much on point, especially with us being in so many different time zones. It actually ended up being way better than a bunch of leagues I had with the clock. So I thought this actually turned out pretty well when it was. And we did it early enough, I think, in the year that there wasn't a million other drafts going on for people. I know me and you always had drafts going all year, but I thought it went pretty well. Like I said, would have done some stuff differently if this was a true first-year dynasty. Some of these older players I probably would have skipped altogether or taken a lot later. There's younger guys I probably would have snagged earlier, just knowing that they would have gone earlier just with that as the thing. So, but I thought it was really nice. That was good move. You kind of look at the board, see people had different strategies. A couple other people did like you, took mostly DBs late after kind of ignoring them early. You saw a few of us that went defensive heavy early. Were the guys kind of chasing our tail for offensive guys late, trying to fill it in, going, oh man, I do only have 4 running backs or only have 4 wide receivers. So we did have to kind of jump in. As you saw, like Aaron Dennis, he's one of the guys. He's a big IDP guy along with me. He kind of went IDP a little earlier. If you look back at his here, as I'm scrolling back up, he started jumping in to IDP with Sweat in the 12th and then Derwin James in the 14th and kind of just started getting IDP guys. And then he went super heavy IDP 18th, 19th, 20th, 21, 22, all IDP guys. Those rounds all in a row before he started sneaking in a few offensive guys between the IDP players. So the thing I love about IDP, there is so many players, there's so many different strategies, and almost all those strategies can be successful if you do them right. So, and I'm already looking at this list, John, and I'm already seeing guys that I think will go later in rounds now and guys that will go earlier. Because again, we did this fairly early in the year and a lot of stuff, camps hadn't started yet. There weren't a lot of set depth charts. So we were kind of guessing on a lot of these players, especially guys on new teams.
Mhm.
But man, there was some really nice picks later on here as I'm kind of looking through
Yeah,
this
I'm looking at Javon
and
Baden.
seeing some good guys that kind of dropped. I mean, the fact
You got
that
Javon Burton in
Landman,
round 30.
Burton. I got Burton in round 30, which I think if this was a dynasty, not a redraft this first year, there's no way he lasts to the 30th round. So, like I said, I was able to get some younger guys late just because of that. I was looking at a few of these other guys, kind of looking through this list. There's a couple more rookie linebackers of people. Wallace for Carolina, 38-7. Braswell, 38-8 was a rookie. You've got Trotter, 39-10. He's a rookie. So I think some of these guys end up going a little earlier if it was a later in the year or full dynasty, because people want to snag these guys up and hold them where, this year you're like, even if he has a good year, I got to throw him back and draft him again next year. So that
Yeah,
always
right.
that just changes things slightly as far as that's concerned. But yeah, there's definitely some guys that dropped here. Landman was a big one. I'm seeing him at 42-4. The fact that news just came out that he says he's going to be the green dot all year, which means he's going to be on the field all the time for Atlanta. The fact that he went in the 42nd round, and I'm going back to see when I took Ellis in the 23rd, and the other Atlanta linebacker, Troy Anderson, went in the 22nd round. So that's 20 rounds later for a guy who says he's going to be the full-time guy. So that's what I said. It just totally depends on when you draft. Time of year can make a big difference on where some of these things go or where some of these players go, depending on it. But I mean, right now, just looking at that looks like a monster steal. You can see a few players were drafted that aren't even on teams right now, but we drafted early enough in the year that we thought they were going to be picked up. Shaq Leonard got picked in the 44th. Aaron Donald, I think, was a mistake. I think he couldn't pick anymore, and he was on auto, and it gave him Aaron Donald, even though he was retired.
Yeah.
I took Simmons in the 43rd, even though he wasn't on a roster yet, thinking he'd be signed by now, but he still hasn't. So, a few things like that. And as you see, some of these guys are, you hear things coming out of camp. Oh, this guy, that guy. So, you'll see some of these guys kind of move up. But I thought it was a fun draft, and it was a good group. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to this first year to kind of see how things pan out exactly with the scoring. And then, hopefully everybody has a good time and comes back next year and is ready to do it all over again.
Jacob Cowing in round 40. It might be the steal of this draft as far as
I saw that too. I was like, we obviously did this really early on because I would have taken I'm taking Cowing everywhere of late. And so even before all the IU news, I just really like Cowing. He was a guy I was grabbing everywhere. Again, he's one of those guys. If it wasn't redraft, I would have probably been all over him a lot earlier in this draft.
Probably 7
if it
rounds
wasn't
earlier.
more of a redraft.
Yeah.
So those are some of the differences you see some of those guys just because of that. We were able to kind of adjust our strategy slightly.
Well, fantastic. JT, this was a absolutely fantastic show. This was to jump into IDP like this with you as a friend, as a co-host, and as a mentor, and a kind of like a I'm not gonna lie, I cheated. I asked you a couple questions throughout this draft. What about this guy? What about that guy? But it's redraft.
I mean, that's the way to go. There's no reason not to ask the questions. I'm in all kinds of IDP chats, and people are always asking, "Hey, what do you think about this guy?" Oh, I got guys are always like sending me their draft list, like, "Hey, I'm in this round. These guys are available. Who would you take? Would you go offense here? Would you go defense here? What position you take?" So I love that stuff. I have no problem answering those types of questions. If people got those questions, feel free to send them to me at JT Orange on Twitter. I'll answer those. Usually I'm pretty timely on those. The only time you're going to get me is if you hit me up on a Monday. Monday's my day off. I'm usually sleeping a lot. People are always like, "Where have you been all day?" I'm like, "I've been on the couch and napping all day trying to catch up from a long weekend at work." So other than that, I'm usually pretty on there pretty quickly and get back to people. But it was a fun draft, good draft. I'm hoping everybody sticks around and we go full bore next year.
Absolutely. This was super fun. And guys, thanks for joining in. Me and JT have been like hella busy last couple of weeks, man. So I'm sorry about the consistency of the show. We try to get a couple in when we can here and there. But we'll keep pumping along. We'll do the best we can to get whatever we can out there to you guys. Hopefully a little more consistent basis, but JT has 100 million things to do with coaching football and food trucks and everything. And I'm working 144 hours in the last 2 weeks with graduation parties and all kind of shit like that. So 50th birthdays, it's just life gets in the way sometimes, but hey,
it has been wild, but John, like I say, we got to get all this in now because football season is not very far away.
Yes,
and then
football is coming.
It's football all day, every day after that.
Where else can they find you at, JT? You got a million places going on. What else?
Oh yeah, if you're an IDP, since obviously we were talking IDP, if you're a member of dynastyleaguefootball.com, DLF, check me out there. I do my top 150 IDP rankings. I also have my rookie rankings in case you're a league that drafts a little bit later in the year for Dynasty. I've got my rookie guys I really like up there. I've been adjusting them over time. So check those out. Fantasy and Frames, you can check me out on Shoot the Gap with Jorge and guests. We try to have guests whenever we can. Those are Wednesday night, typically 10 Eastern, right around 10 Eastern. Sometimes a little gets pushed back to about 10:30. So somewhere around that time, usually we do Shoot the Gap on Wednesdays. So you can check me on that. I'm always here with you, John, on the Dynasty Evaluation and Commission Evaluation podcast. So here, hopefully, the Stu and JT Brew. I've had a couple people like, you haven't had a show forever. I'm like, I've been on so many other shows. So I'm going to get that going. Me and John are going to do our season preview that we meant to do when the schedule came out and things got nuts. Now we have a little more idea what's happening this year. So we're going to get that put out here shortly. And then I'll have my my college football and NFL football gambling shows on the Stu and JT Brew here on Fantasy and Frames. When the season hits, I'll be doing it every week. So check those out as well.
Stud Muffin. We had a big commissioner based show yesterday. It was fantastic talking about commission stuff, and then today we got to talk about some IDP. This is what it's all about, man. Dynasty evaluation show. Just there's not one topic we can't cover here. We'll get into more college stuff in the off season, but right now we're going more towards redraft wise. We'll try and do every week. We'll try and do like as in the past, injuries, waiver wire. Start sits, all that kind of stuff. Start evaluating teams again, which we should have done a lot more this summer, but that'll be next year for sure in the offseason, evaluating teams. But thank you very much, everybody. Dynasty Evaluation, John McGlynn 75. Watch this show on the Fantasy and Friends YouTube channel, and have a great day, everyone.